literal fucking race riots happening in Northern Ireland, and no one seems to be talking about it on here. No one seems.
Remember, what was it, last summer, not even a year ago, Black Americans saw with their own eyes that they were Black people in Scotland with Scotland K. Brown, right? And we were like, oh, hey, cousin, how you doing? They like Black people over there? And there were a lot of Black people in Scotland that were like, yeah, well, they don't think that there's racism here, but, well, there is. And then Black people in Ireland were like, yup, there's a problem. And Irish people and Scottish people were like, no, 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 and basically said, like, we don't see color. Remember that? And Black Americans were like, yeah, that this is happening is extremely unsurprising behavior, given the political climate and the economic climate that is happening over there, because it is not a phenomenon that is unique in the United States when there are occurrences such as Tulsa and Rosewood that have happened in the United States' history. The destroying of successful Black and brown, but primarily Black American businesses and neighborhoods at the hands of racist white people. It's not unique. It's not unsurprising, especially given that they're using the guise of protecting women and children while simultaneously putting women and children who are not native to Ireland in danger. Because you set fire to a home when there's women and children living in the home. That means that you don't see those women and children that aren't white as human. That's what that means. So, Black people both in Ireland and the United States have been trying to tell y'all. But I also want y'all to think about the origins of the United States of America and the fact that there are a lot of foundational Black Americans who have Irish last names. Also, in Ireland, y'all use the habitual be. Where do you think Black Americans got that from?
Happening in Belfast right now is really difficult to watch, and as someone who's from there and as a GP, it's important to say that moments like this don't just cause physical harm, they impact an individual's health in a much wider way. When people feel unsafe in their community, when there's fear, tension, anger in the air, we see it. Anxiety goes up, sleep is affected, people withdraw, it has a real impact. And in a place like Northern Ireland with its complicated and difficult past, feeling unsafe in your own home or community isn't an experience that's new to many people who live there. And often at times like this, there's a pull towards blame or towards grouping people together, but one person's actions are not the responsibility of an entire community. And when we lose that sense of shared humanity, when we disconnect more from one another, that's when the harm spreads even further. So if you're feeling overwhelmed watching over this, step back when you need to, talk to someone, don't carry it all on your own. And if you are directly affected by this, please reach out to your GP, to your local church, local support groups, to people that are around you. Because health isn't just physical, it's also how we feel and how we show up for each other, and right now that really matters. So stay safe, be kind, and keep spreading love.
Welcome back, everyone. Today we are discussing a story that has really sparked a lot of discussion online, and the conversation centers around people in Northern Ireland who are now facing social and economic frustrations and are looking for support from different communities, including the Black Americans. So the discussion has also reignited questions about solidarity, historical relationships, and what happens when groups that once stood apart suddenly find themselves facing similar challenges. So now, before we continue, it's just important to note that people are not a monolith. Yes, no racial, ethnic, ethnic or national group thinks exactly the same. So the opinions being discussed here represent viewpoints that are expressed by some individuals and commentators, but not entire populations. So with that said, let's dive in.
Belfast is burning because of a gentleman that flew from Sudan, Khartoum, to Paris, and then he flew from Paris to Dublin, and then he took a bus and went through the open border, settled in Belfast, claimed asylum, and instead of getting makeshift accommodation, they gave him residence and social benefits. He got all that. Turns out he fled, he left, and now they say he, Hadi Aludid, people thought he was Somalian, but he had tried to, a gentleman called Stephen Ogilvie in Belfast. It's a really nice neighborhood. But radiographer, the NHS, tried to stop him, and he said, "I'm gonna do you." The man he was using a kitchen cooking knife lost his eye, and now the people are angry because there's a loophole that has been used. So they're saying it should be closed. Opposition leader, party, Democratic Union Next Party in Northern Ireland, Gavin Robinson, said it is the collective duty of the government to protect its citizens and to ensure that they close their porous borders because immigration is not working now. And they are now about to spend £3.7 billion to ensure that police can arrest, detain, and deport illegal immigrants. They reject at least 81% of people that come there. But out of 13,000 people, now they are complaining, the citizens, that they have tent cities. And they had tried to, the UK had tried to deport people to Rwanda. They spent about £700 million on that. So the people have also voted against a lot of immigration loopholes, and nothing has been done, which has led to violent protests against violent immigrants. So this gentleman who had fled, there's no record of him in Sudan because he used fraudulent things. But also now, the problem that they're facing is he had been there for more than 3 years. Yeah, because he got there 2023. He still has residence until 2025. But he had left officially. The civil war in Sudan started in April 2023. So he left 2023 February. That's like 2 months before the war started. So asylum seeker. But the people are mad. So that's what happened. So he was trying to take off this section of the man's head, this body. Yeah. So xenophobia, right?
So yet again, there are race riots in the UK, Northern Ireland. And again, it's because there's some horrific violence which has taken place, and it was done by a non-white person. So white people have took it upon themselves to enact pogroms, race riots, setting people's houses on fire who aren't white. Again, I have to make a video about white people and white Europeans and how they pretend, at least a certain demographic, pretend they're above racism because they face colonialism themselves. When really push comes to shove and something awful happens, and their response is not to be there for the people affected. No, not to be like show kindness to those people who've been impacted, but to harm people who have got fucking nothing to do with this. It's really just an excuse, again, for them to express their racial hatred. It's plain and simple. They're bored and they're vile human beings who want to express their own hatred. And yeah, it's quite fucking disgusting. And there's people in the UK, like Nigel Farage, who more than encourage this. There's many political actors who encourage this thinking, and it does come from saying, we need to stop the boats. We do need, these people are bringing over dangerous crimes, and they're bringing over, no, they're fucking not. Crime is not, dependent on a border. Crime and violence transcends borders. Some people even bring crime and violence to other people's countries. Cough, cough, the UK. Don't come saying, oh, other people are bringing violence. You actually went over to all of those countries, brought untold levels of violence to those people, destroyed them, left them as states that could not even properly function, which means you create people who are not mentally stable because they've grown up in an environment of perpetual war and violence, and then they come here because you have presented yourself as this beacon of civilization and people hope for a better life. And sometimes you get people who are so deeply mentally unwell and affected by stuff that you caused, and people get hurt. This is the cycle of violence of colonialism. This is it. This is the cycle of violence of colonialism. You go and do untold horrors across the world, take no responsibility, and then people get hurt. And people can be like, oh, you're making excuses. I'm not making excuses. I'm not making excuses at all. This is an explanation as to why things happen. You guys want to say it's racism, that it's just because people from those countries are inherently violent, when you lot, oh my god, it doesn't even touch the fucking sides how violent the United Kingdom is. How Great Britain itself is probably one of the most violent countries, has probably one of the most violent histories in the world. It doesn't even touch the fucking sides. The only country two countries I'd say might rival it is the United States, 3, Israel, and Belgium. And you want to ask about Belgium? Look at the DRC. I needn't say fucking more. Like, you guys, I'm not making excuses that, you allow people from the global south to enact violence. No. But let's just look at things from a holistic perspective, I bet.
For years, conversations about social justice, about equality and community organizing have often occurred in separate spaces. Different groups have focused on their own experiences, their own concerns, and their own struggles. And in many cases, there has been limited interaction between communities that could have benefited from understanding one another. So today, some observers are arguing that circumstances are changing. And as economic pressure increases and public frustration grows, some people in Northern Ireland have begun looking beyond their traditional circles, for example, of community organization and activism. In online discussions, while I was perusing through the social media, some people pointed to the long history of Black American activism as an example of how communities can mobilize, can advocate for change, and maintain resilience during difficult times. And this has led to a surprising question being asked in certain corners of social media, that what if more cooperation had existed between these communities years ago? And for some commentators, that question comes with a sense of regret. They even argue that many people dismissed concerns raised by Black Americans in previous decades. We have issues involving inequality, issues involving representation, and economic opportunity were often viewed as problems affecting someone else. And as a result, opportunities for broad alliances may have been missed. And now, as frustrations grow in different parts of society, some individuals are looking back and wondering whether stronger relationships could have been built earlier. And the argument goes something like this. When one group experiences challenges, other groups often assume those challenges will never affect them. But history has repeatedly shown that economic instability, political tension, and social uncertainty can eventually impact many different communities. And as a result, people who once saw little reason to engage with one another may suddenly discover common interests. Supporters of this view say there is an important lesson here. They believe that solidarity is easiest when it is built before a crisis occurs, not after. And waiting until problems become severe often makes cooperation more difficult because trust takes time to develop. And this is where the conversation becomes especially interesting. Many activists throughout history have argued that alliances should not be based solely on immediate self-interest. Instead, they should be built on shared principles such as fairness, opportunity, and respect. And when communities only come together after experiencing hardship themselves, critics argue that the partnership can appear transactional rather than genuine. Others, however, take a more practical view. They say that people often learn through experience. Sometimes individuals do not fully understand another group's concerns until they encounter similar obstacles in their own lives. And while that realization may come late, they argue that it can still create opportunities for meaningful cooperation moving forward. And that brings us to the larger question, that can communities with different histories find common ground? And the answer depends on whom you ask. Some believe the answer is absolutely yes. They point to numerous examples throughout history where diverse groups joined together around shared goals despite having different backgrounds and experiences. Others remain skeptical, and they argue that true cooperation requires more than a temporary argument. It requires listening, accountability, and a willingness to acknowledge past misunderstandings. Without these ingredients, alliances can be fragile and short-lived. What makes this discussion resonate with so many people is that it touches on a universal theme, and many of us have experienced moments when we wished we had paid closer attention to someone else's perspective earlier. And whether in politics, in communities, workplaces, or personal relationships, hindsight often reveals opportunities that were missed. The current debate reflects that same idea on a larger scale, and some commentators see a lesson about empathy. They even argue that listening to others before their concerns become our own can lead to stronger communities and better outcomes for everyone involved. And others see a lesson about unity. They believe that modern challenges are increasingly interconnected and that no group can successfully navigate them alone. Regardless of where one stands politically, the discussion highlights an important reality. People often discover shared interests in unexpected ways, and the conversations taking place today are not just about protests or political disagreements. They are also about relationships, trust, and whether communities can find common ground despite differences in history and experience. And as this debate continues, one thing is clear. The questions being raised extend far beyond Northern Ireland. They touch on broader issues that societies around the world continue to wrestle with. So how do people build alliances? When should communities support one another? And what can be learned from opportunities that may have been missed in the past? Those are questions that will likely remain part of the public conversation for a long time to come. And thanks for watching. And if you enjoyed this commentary, be sure to like, subscribe, and let us know your thoughts in the comments. Turn on the notification bell. How important do you think solidarity between different communities is during times of social and economic uncertainty? We'll see you in the next video. All credit belongs to the original creators of the video. This video is meant for educational purposes and commentary purposes as well. Thank you so much for watching. See you in the next one.